All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our training on VS Code on the FASRC clusters. Um, the the main prerequisite here is that you should be familiar with just logging into the terminal, and assumption is also that you have used VS Code at least locally using your personal device on your own. So the training really is focused on how you can launch a session on the cluster. It's not really about going through VS Code or training you on VS Code. It's really about launching VS Code session on the cluster and the various ways there are to be able to do that. And as you will see, most of the training will focus on how you can do it on the login node and on the compute node. So we'll start with just what VS Code is, which I'm sure you probably would already be knowing, and then go into pros and cons of using the various approaches or options there are to launching on the cluster, and how you should be mindful of it so that you can figure out based on your workflow which approach is the best suitable for you. And then I will go into just doing some quick demos on how to launch the VS Code. Most of this is really heavily derived from our documentation, the user-facing documentation. All that is already linked here. And then I will end with some best practices that you should consider when you are working with the VS Code on the cluster, because cluster is a shared resource. So you should always be mindful of that. And then some of the troubleshooting techniques that we have gathered just by interacting with our users, either through tickets or in office hours, some of the common issues that have popped up, and we've put together some sort of a list of, if you're facing this, what you should be looking out for. So with that, as you already must be knowing, so VS Code is really, it's a Microsoft product known for Visual Studio Code. And it's, by far one of the most popular, if not the popular code editor. And, it was developed by Microsoft for essentially all three main operating systems: Windows, Linux, Mac OS, and even, you can do that using web browsers. So it really gives a lot of flexibility to users in terms of editing. The main features include, and I think that is also the reason why it is so popular with users, is that it has a support for debugging. It lets you do syntax highlighting. It also does intelligent code completion. It lets you manage snippets through its interface. You can do code refactoring or restructuring, for your code in VS Code. And then from that, it also has embedded version control through Git. So you don't have to really go back and forth. Once you have that Git installed in there, you can easily have that version control going on for you. And then you can install a lot of packages as extension using the VS Code Marketplace. And that gives a lot of flexibility to people who are working with 2-3 different softwares or different packages, all essentially installed in one place, so people can switch back and forth between them easily. And so typically, what we have seen is that it lets our users use this interface to edit and even run their code, their local code, on Jupyter or R, directly on the cluster. They don't need to specially log into the cluster. They don't need to use OOD or submit a batch job or do it interactively. They can just do all of this using VS Code on the cluster. So this is really the main advantage, at least for our users, that we have seen that they like the seamless integration between their local VS Code installation and whatever they have, the code locally, to be able to run it on the cluster without having to go through other channels. So it's a seamless integration between their local personal device and the cluster. And that's why VS Code is so hugely popular. Now, when you are thinking about using VS Code, there are ways you can do that. And in order to install it based on whatever operating system you have on your personal device, will essentially define what channel you should use to download the executable. So I'm just linking here that if you're a Linux user or if you're on Mac or Windows, so these links will take you directly from there, or if you just, this is the main download link, it already will give you 3 categories depending on your operating system. So you can carry out the installation. It's pretty easy. All you need to do is, let's say if you're on Mac, click on, download the executable, and then you essentially just put that in the application folder, and you're good to go. So overall, in terms of the installation, it's not a heavy lift at all. And in terms of launching the application, what I'm showing here is essentially just if you're a Mac user, there are 3 ways you can do that. So, I can just quickly show you that. So if you are on a terminal, oh, it did not like that. Hang on. Oops. This works better that way. So if you're on Mac and you already have the binary installed, all you need to do is on the terminal, you do code, and then it will launch the application for you. So this is essentially what it will be. Or otherwise, you can do your command spacebar and then type code there, and it will bring up the application again here. Or the other alternative is you go to your Finder and then go to the applications folder, and you will see that there is a code binary here. I think it's in the VS Code. Yeah, right here. And then you double click that, you can launch the interface. So there are, on Mac, because I do have Mac, so that's the main reason I have put that there. But, similar structure is there for Windows or if you're on Linux. But the main thing is these are the ways you can launch the application on your personal device. In this case, the example is of that of Mac. One quick thing, I have also put a link on our chat, and if you click on it, it will take you to the training material website. If you scroll down, I have also provided the slides for VS Code, so you can follow the same thing that I'm doing right now, slide by slide. Might be easier if you want to kind of follow along and then try to do your, launching a session on the cluster. It might be easier if you have this open on your browser. You should be able to download it too. So it's a PDF that you will get. So moving on. Now, so in terms of using VS Code on the cluster, there are really 2 ways. One is you can do this directly from your personal device onto the cluster. So I'm essentially categorizing these 2 ways under remote development. So whatever remote development you want to do using VS Code, you can launch the instance in 2 ways. One is where you are using your personal device and actually having the seamless integration between your device and the cluster. The other one is where you are directly going to the cluster. So you don't have anything to do with the VS Code instance on your personal device. You go to OOD, you essentially operate the VS Code app that we have developed on OOD, and then use that for doing your remote development work. What we have found is that our users don't prefer the OOD approach, even though it is mostly resilient to network glitches is because they like to have that seamless integration when they're doing remote development work and trying to run it on the cluster. So that is the reason why they don't like to break that, go on to OOD, and then load the VS Code application we have built. But if that is not very important for you, if the remote development work you're doing, the seamless integration is not really needed or is not required, we do recommend all our users go to OOD to launch VS Code. Because as I said, it actually is resilient to network glitches. It will avoid a lot of other issues you may encounter if you're trying to do it using your personal device. Okay, but the focus of this training is really all on this number 1 here. Because 2 is straightforward. All you need to do is just follow these instructions on how to launch VS Code on OOD, and you're all set. But as I said, our users do prefer doing this from their personal device. So everything that I'm going to talk about is really captured here on our user-facing documentation. So that is what we will follow step by step and do the demo of how to launch VS Code on a login node or a compute node using your personal device. Okay. All right. So before we do that, as I said, we want to kind of be aware of the pros and cons of these approaches that we will take to launch a session on the cluster. And the reason why it's important is because this should help you in deciding which approach is the best approach for you, because everything has its advantage and disadvantage. So the first one that I'm going to talk to you about is where you're launching a VS Code session using the remote tunnel approach via the SBatch option. I'll go into more details about this, in my demo, but this is the FASRC recommended way. The really main reason is that it is resilient to network glitches, okay? And also, when you set this up, it will essentially always launch the session on a compute node, okay? This is the only method that can also launch session on a FASI compute node. However, if you are going to do that, then you need to make sure that your personal device, your personal system is configured according to Harvard's minimum privacy, security responsibility. So that is the documentation that is linked here. So if you're thinking about doing this, where you're using your personal device to create a tunnel between the device and a compute node on FASI, you have to make sure that these things, your personal device, is actually in compliance with the requirements here, okay? And on top of it, the remote tunnel option also supports launching sessions on Windows, which is what is a limitation of the other approach that I will be talking about, which is the remote SSH. It gives you issues when you're trying to launch a session specifically on a compute node, and if your personal device is a Windows machine. So this is the pros for the remote tunnel via SBatch option. However, the slight disadvantage is, one, it's a multi-step process to launch a session, and you will see it in the demo because you're not directly doing it from your personal device. You're first logging into the cluster. You have a batch script that you need to submit, follow along the instructions there to be able to launch the tunnel. So that is where I said it's a multi-step process, and it cannot be launched directly from the personal device. Then it allows for a single VS Code session only. You cannot run concurrent sessions. You cannot have multiple sessions at the max. If you're able to open another tunnel, it will still open on the same compute node that has been allotted to you, to your job. So you cannot have multiple sessions running on multiple nodes. And then the other thing you need to keep in mind is to also edit your batch file for compute node resource allocation. So every time you need to be mindful that if I want to launch my VS Code session on, let's say, a GPU node versus a CPU node, I need to go back and edit my batch file for it. So, there's that mindfulness involved here. Now, you can also do remote tunnel in an interactive manner. And here it's just an interactive job that you are actually going to do using salloc. So here again, the pro is that unlike the SPatch option, the interactive option also supports launching session on the login node. So here, this can support launching the session on both login and compute node. And it also supports launching session on Windows, okay? But yes, you cannot do the remote tunnel interactive on FASRC because remote tunnel interactive uses the salloc command, and on FASRC, you're not allowed to execute salloc command. So that's, that is the main difference between these two approaches. And then in terms of its disadvantage, it is not resilient to network glitches. If you are, let's say, in an area where the signal strength is not that strong, you could get dropped connection from time to time. And then again, on top of it, it also has these 3 cons that are listed for the SPatch option, that it's a multi-step process. You cannot launch it directly from the personal device. And also it only allows for a single session per user at a time. There is no batch file involved here, so that's why the number 4 is not applicable, but the other 3 are all applicable as cons for the interactive approach. Now, moving on to the other 2 types. So the other one is the remote SSH. So here, you are now only doing an interactive job. There is no batch job submission involved in either of these approaches with this method, with the remote SSH method. So the first one is where it uses what is called a proxy command. And here, this by far, at least in my opinion, is a method that has least steps involved to launch a VS Code session on a login node or on a compute node. And you can launch it directly from your personal device. It works, as I said, it works for both login and compute node. And also on top of it, the remote SSH option actually does support concurrent sessions on CPU and GPU nodes. You cannot have multiple sessions on different nodes of the same type, like different CPU nodes or different GPU nodes, but you could have one session running on a CPU node, one session on a GPU node. And in addition to that, you could also launch a tunnel if you're doing remote SSH. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of the type of sessions you can spawn on the cluster. The disadvantage here, however, is you need to remember to edit the SSH config file on your personal device for a compute node resource allocation. So this is, I would say, one of the biggest things that you need to be mindful of, which is in a way similar to the first option too, the first method, which is remote tunnel via SBatch, that you will have to remember to edit your batch file for compute node resource allocation. Similarly, even here, everything is controlled through this SSH configuration file that lives on your personal device. And whenever you're asking for a session to be launched on a compute node, you need to make sure that the corresponding resource allocation have been edited to satisfy your need. Otherwise, it can result in errors or issues where the job is not getting launched, which means your session is not getting launched on the compute node. Unlike the first one, this is not resilient to network glitches. So again, think about the area you are in. If it can give you stable network connection, by all means, this might be a good option for you to try right away. But if you are in a place where there are often network disruptions, you probably don't want to do it because the session will keep getting dropped. And then on top of it, it also does not support launching a VS Code session on a compute node if you're coming from Windows. You can do it, you can launch a session on the login node as a Windows user, but you will not be able to launch a compute node session if you're a Windows user. It's just not supported in this method. And another thing that we have found out is this is specifically for GPU node, where you need to keep refreshing or need to have at least 2 to 3 tries to get a session to launch on a GPU node when you are using this method. This doesn't happen with our CPU node. So let's say if you want to try a node from a shared partition or a test partition, you're fine. But for GPU specifically, I've seen that you have to keep on hitting the retry button 2 to 3 times before it is able to establish a connection between your personal device and the GPU node. So that is one thing that, it's a minor, irritation, but it's there. So I wanted to also mention that. The other one is a proxy jump. So instead of so it is still remote SSH, but which means you still will have, as I will show you in the demo, you will have entries in your SSH configuration file on your personal device. But instead of using a proxy command, you will use proxy jump. I won't be giving you a full demo for this, but there is, I've linked the documentation that supports, that it essentially illustrates how to use proxy jump. And I'll also show you how your configuration file will look a little different if you're doing proxy command versus proxy jump. So this is also an interactive job. In terms of the pros, this can be directly launched from personal device, and it works again for both login and compute node. I haven't tested out if it supports concurrent sessions, but I think it is because this is more of a property of remote SSH than of the method or the approach you're using to establish that remote SSH. So I think number 4 should be true, but if you are a proxy jump user, by all means you can test it out whether it supports concurrent sessions or not. And in terms of the cons, it is a multi-step process to get to a compute node. And then again, it's not resilient to network glitches, and also it does not support your compute node session on Windows. So any questions so far before we start getting into the demo? Okay, if not, then moving on. So here, I'm going to talk about how to establish a tunnel using the batch job submission option, and then go from there. So as I said, everything, if you click on all of this, it'll actually take you to this documentation here, and talk about what we recommend if you really want to kind of do this using a personal device. And then the first approach is the remote tunnel via batch job. So the first step would be for you to first log in to the cluster, and then you can just copy this entire content into and name that script as your VSCode.jobs. That will be your batch script that you will be creating. So first things first, I'm gonna log into the cluster. And what I will do is make sure I don't want to, okay, so I will need it later, so I'll keep that as is. Also, let me increase this size a little bit so that it's better visible. I think that should be good. I will start logging into the cluster. Oops. So I'm just going to first be on the login node. And okay. And then the two-factor authentication. And I do recommend if any one of you is able to follow along and do this also at your end, it'll be really great because, we can use direct feedback as in when you're doing this. So now that I'm on this login node, so this one is called Holy Login 07. What I'm going to do is I will, because I already have this on my profile, I'll just show you the batch script that I have. So things to look out for, right? So now this is where I'm declaring the resources I need from the cluster. So here I'm saying I want to be on the test partition. What that means is that this will fetch me CPU nodes, right? It'll give me a memory of 4 gigs, which is, again, you have to be mindful what type of job you're going to do. If you're going to run a script that is more memory intensive, this particular number needs to be increased, okay? Same goes for the time. It will be, so your job will be submitted and it will be active for a total of 4 hours. If you need to run your script through VS Code for longer than that, you need to edit this. If it is for a smaller amount of time, you need to edit it. If you're done using the VS Code, you can by all means cancel your Slurm job. And I'll show you how we do that. And then this is the number of cores you're requesting. Again, the number should change should the need arise for that. So for example, if I say I'm gonna request, something from, I need GPU nodes. So say GPU test. And then because I want GPUs, so now I also need to declare how many GPUs I need. So I'm going to say 1. I'm going to, for now, comment it out, but this is basically to show you that this is where that mindfulness will come in play, where you need to know what your batch script has and how it needs to be modified based on the work you're trying to do using VS Code. So once I have done that, then what it also does is it declares like a temp location. So you can see there is a my scratch variable that is declared, and this is essentially pointing to your local scratch. The main reason is we are going to download the executable, the code executable, and just put it on this particular location, because all we need is that code executable to run for this particular for this particular job. If you want to have a more permanent location for it, you can potentially change that. You can comment it out, download it, say, let's say on your home folder or on your lab folder, and then actually declare a variable that will point to that location. Or another option is you could have an entry for it on your .bashrc. So for example, if I show you my .bashrc here, so I have declared this particular path that actually has the code executable here. And if I, so I think I also did my, yeah, so because it's on my .bashrc, I don't need to declare the path for it because I can use my executable. It's already in my path. So that is another way you can do that, where you first download your code executable and then just put it in your .bashrc like this, so that it's always available in your path. So what I'm going to do is I will add that here just so that you guys have a record of it if in case you are interested. And then this should be path to code executable. And that is how you will put it in your path, right? Okay, so moving on to our batch script. So once you have declared that, I had commented this out, but again, if you go back to the documentation, you will see the documentation will show you the curl command that you need to execute to actually download the code binary, the code file. So this is essentially the code file that you will download, and then you will untar it and put it in your My Scratch location. Okay. So that is the one step that is mentioned here, which you guys will have to do because you don't have the code executable on the anywhere on the cluster. So that is when this needs to happen. Okay. And once you have done that, then you also need to declare these variables so that you are now able to run the code tunnel. So if you want to launch a remote tunnel, the way to do that is you give your executable wherever that is. So here in this case, it's located under our My Scratch. So you call that out, and then you add the tunnel, and then you start with these flags. So you need to insert these flags because you need to tell the tunnel how to establish the tunnel based on what authentication method. So here, the authentication method we are showing you as an example is that of Microsoft, but you can use GitHub. So there are two options that you can establish this tunnel using Microsoft or GitHub authentication method, and both are completely safe. So it's up to you that whether you want to go with Microsoft as a provider or GitHub. So that's what I have mentioned here, that if you want to use GitHub, just change Microsoft to GitHub and it'll work fine. So now, once you have said this, then this is the last bit that is part of your batch script, which is where it will tell your executable to accept your server license terms. And you also declare a name for your tunnel. So here we are calling it as Canon. You can declare whatever name you need because it will show once you follow along that this tunnel is now ready to be open. So that is the name it will use. So whether you do Canon or compute or something else, that is the name you're providing to your tunnel. So anything that needs to be edited really is the name of the tunnel, the provider, if you will, and if you want to have code executable always in your path, then you will probably have to do something like this, where you're blocking out these two commands here because you have already downloaded it. And put it in your bash RC. But if you don't want to do that, I would say just simply copy paste this. This is good to go. And once you have your VSCode.job script ready, all you need to do is, as mentioned here, just go ahead and submit it. So what I'm going to do is I will do sbatch VSCode.job. And real quickly, if you look at my VSCode.job, and the resource. So I'm right now asking for resources from the test partition. So I'm only looking for a CPU node. The other two were shown as an example. I have commented those out. So if you add another hash here, it comments out those lines or those commands. Now, okay, so now I will submit my VSCode.job. And then the next step from there is to execute this particular command. So you want to open the Slurm output file, and you want to essentially follow that along at its end. So that's why where the tail is important, and you want to follow along. And now the Slurm job that I submitted is this job ID 5233195. So that gets created by default because that's how Slurm is set up to do. So once I hit enter, it will tell me this particular, this particular message. So this is where this multi-step thing comes into play. So now what I'll have to do is I will have to go back to my browser and open this link. So which is what I will do here. And I had put in my VSCode.job GitHub instead of Microsoft. So I'm just going to do that. And then you copy the code that is provided here and just, okay. And then you say continue. And then you say continue. So now you're saying, so, and you will see a similar thing if you are doing for the Microsoft, it'll say authorize Visual Studio Code. You will click on it and you will get a similar message that says, congratulations, you're all set. You can now close this window, okay? So now what will happen is go back to your terminal, and because you are following along the messages that are getting printed in this out file, the .out file, just wait for a few seconds. Another message should appear that will actually show you the URL to the tunnel. So that is what is shown here, that once you accept all these things, because by default, you've already said that I'm going to accept everything here. Like these are the flags that you're using in your code, the batch job submission file. So you don't need to actively do this here. So it saves you some time. And now we already got this, open this link in your browser. So this is what we are waiting to get back. So here it is saying, I've received some error, failed to look up tunnel. Why? Is anyone else following it along? Did anyone else get this type of an error? No. Okay. Maybe what I can do is,
I wonder if it's due to the VS Code version, the code version.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So so this sort of a change happened as recently as yesterday. So what I will do is I'll just go ahead and update my code file. And then now I want this also to work. So I will disable this. And then I want, so I will disable. Okay. Let's try this again. All right. So now, before I try this again, what I need to do is make sure I don't have any jobs running, which is fine because the job actually I canceled it. So that's good. So now I'm going to submit another job. So let me do that. And I'll do the same tail command. Now I will again go. So now this is because I copied it from our documentation here. So I will going to do via Microsoft. So I'm gonna close this. And it gives me this particular code that I need to copy and paste it over there. Let's say next. I'll pick the account and it say yes, I'm going to do it for visual code. And yeah, so it'll say you may now close this window. So here I'm again just waiting for that link to appear so that I can open that. So here, yep. So now you can see that it's saying open this link in your browser, and this is the name of the tunnel, the Canon tunnel. I think, again, this is going back to whatever the name you have declared in your VSCode.job. So for me, it is Canon tunnel. So there are two ways we can do about this. You can copy this into your browser, and I'll show you how it looks like so that, because this is a live demo. So if you copy this and hit enter, it will start the Microsoft interface on your browser. You should pick the account that you chose in your provider. So in this case, we are, if you remember, when I submitted my job the second time, I chose Microsoft. So that is the account I'm going to stick with. So once you do that, it is now going to establish a tunnel on a CPU compute node and your browser, or in a way, your local device. So just wait for a bit there. Okay, so now if you click on this hamburger sign, you can open a terminal and it will show you once it is done connecting, because it's opening the remote. So you should now see that you're on a terminal of a compute node, so the Holy 8A. So that is different from the login node. So you're on a compute node, which is a CPU compute node, and you're ready to do your work on this particular node. So this is via the browser interface. The other thing is, if you have your, your local VS Code, you start that up. Now, the prerequisite, as you will see on our documentation, is that you should have already installed the Remote Explorer and Remote SSH extensions. So assuming that those things have been taken care of, all you need to do is first you click on your accounts, make sure that you turn this remote tunnel access. So in my case, since I already did it yesterday when I was trying it out, it's already on for my profile. But before you start the tunnel, make sure that this remote tunnel access is on once you click on your profile icon. And once that is the case, then you click on the Remote Explorer. And once you click on that, now it will show you the tunnel, and it will show you the tunnel which is running. So that is, remember, the Canon tunnel is what the message we got, that this is now created with this name Canon tunnel. So if it is a successful creation on your local VS Code instance, it should show you as running. So now when you click on it, it will actually connect you to the same login node that we saw on our browser. So if I open the terminal, it will be the same 8A24302, which is the same as this 8A24302. So you don't really need that. You can just, close this if you are comfortable working using your desktop app of VS Code. So this is essentially the demo for establishing a tunnel using a batch script. So what I'm going to do is, it's very important for us to exit cleanly. So I exited from there, and then I click on this tunnel, the connection here, the launchpad in a way, and close remote connection. So just to make sure that it has been cleanly exited, or the remote connection has been cleanly closed. So you should really see your launchpad just showing you this particular icon, where it's not showing you the name of the device that you're connected to, the remote device. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I will quit that. Another important thing is, because my work is all done now, so I'm going to hit Control-C because I don't need this anymore. But before calling it done, there's another important thing that I need to do, which is look at my job. It will show it's running. And remember, I had asked for 4 hours in my batch script. So I need to cancel it because I don't need this anymore. So this is very important to do that, which is what I will do here as cancel, so that all the resources I had blocked for my use are now put back into the shared pool. So this is one of the best practices that I will quickly tell you about, but that is something to be very mindful of. Okay, now going back to this. So this is essentially how you can establish a tunnel using SBatch. The same thing is, so the similar approach is when you're trying to do it in an interactive mode. Here, the main difference is you don't need to declare any batch script. All you're doing is everything interactively. So you're again on a login node, but on the login node, now what you will do is first you will run the curl command to execute the file directly. So if I do this, to download the executable directly. So right now, I just want to make sure I don't have a file downloaded from before, which I do. So I will take that out. And then, so I'm on my login node. I'll run the curl command, press enter, and it will download this file, VSCode CLI.tar. Now you run the second command and you open that tarball. So that is what is happening here. And once you do that, you will see this code executable appear on your home folder. From here, all you need to do is first, so this is what I mentioned here. It's up to you. You can let it be here or move it to another location and put that in your path. That it's your call. And if you're putting it in your path using your .bashrc, you need to make sure that you source it. Now, this is where the multi-step process comes in. So you are doing it in interactive mode. So you have to now first use the salloc command to go to the compute node that you want to establish the tunnel. So in this case, I did GPU test. So I'm on a GPU node this time. And then you will run this command code tunnel. So once you do this, I will get the same thing that it'll say, because I had already opened a Canon tunnel earlier, so it is still showing me that this is already available. So this is the issue with the tunnel approach, that it will remember for some time that you had created a tunnel. So if in this case, so in this case, it is going to open that, but it will be on the GPU node. So you won't have to at least re-authenticate and stuff like that I showed you when we had submitted that batch script, because for some time it will remember it. So now we are just waiting for it to open the connection on our GPU node. Okay, so while that is happening, let's move on because we only have 8 minutes left. So the next is the remote SSH approach. The remote SSH approach will require you to edit what is called your SSH configuration file on your personal device. So before that, I just want to make sure that yep. So if you can see that it has put us on a GPU node here, okay? So I'm going to exit from this and make sure that I close everything so that I'm not running into a stale connection. So I do this. And now once I exit from my compute node, interactively, all the resources are relinquished. So I don't need to worry about canceling any job. So moving on to our remote SSH approach, here, if you are on Mac, your config file is typically located under a hidden folder called .ssh. If it's not there, you can create it with this name, config. If you're a Windows user, it should be located in your C drive under users, followed by the username that you have used for your machine, and then .ssh/config. Okay. And again, if it's not there, you can create a config file. But the main thing to see here is, so I'm going to open, now I'm on my local, on my personal device. Okay, so here, if I go to .ssh and open the config file, Emacs is the text editor I use, whatever text editor you are used to using, by all means, just use that to open the config file. So these are the main entries you would need to have in your config file in order to establish a connection or a session. One is the host that will essentially tell your personal device to directly get connected to the login node. So this is where the host name is. And here you're choosing a host nickname. So I'm calling it Canon. You can call it login, you can call it whatever, but something which is the host nickname for the host you're trying to connect to. So in this case, it's the login node. The next entry is here, which is that of your compute node. So now you have a different nickname, and here don't just copy paste these main entries. I'm not going to go into detail because these are all related to establishing a remote SSH connection. But the other thing is, yes, so you will be declaring your username just as what you will have here. And then you will now use what is called the proxy command. So this is the proxy command approach, where you are establishing an SSH connection to the login node. So here, the name that I'm using is the same host nickname that I have declared for the login node. So the workflow here is you first establish a connection to the login node. And from the login node, you then issue an salloc command, which is an interactive command to get to the to the compute node that you want. So in this case, the example is that of a, this is a test partition. So I'm asking for 8 GBs and 2 CPUs per task for a total of 1 hour. So that is the proxy command that I'm doing. And then I also have another section, which is the same as above, but the host nickname is VSCode_GPU, because now I want to land on a GPU node. So that is what is shown here, where I'm asking for GPU test partition with 1 GPU allotted to my job. Okay, so these are the main entries of your SSH config file. So you always will have to remember, based on the work you're trying to do, how to change your memories or CPU per task or the partition you're on, or add more sections as what I have done here. Okay, so that is something to be mindful of when you're trying to do the remote SSH approach. So here, going back, this is essentially what it tells you, that you will have your configuration file. These are the entries you will have to do in your configuration file. For Mac, it is this. For Windows, it's this. The one thing is, for Windows with remote SSH, you can only get to the login node. Reason is, it does not support what is called like a master connection or a single sign-on option in Windows. And the way our cluster is set up, in order to have multiple SSH sessions, we need to have a single sign-on or a control master connection enabled. And because that is a requirement from our side, Windows people can only launch a VS Code session on the login node using this approach, but not on the compute node. So if you want to be on the compute node, remote tunnel is the only option for you. Okay. All right. So now, if you want to establish a connection on the compute node, there is one additional step you will have to do prior to launching your VS Code session, which is generate your SSH, public and private keys, a pair of that. And then this is the method to do all of this. I'm not going to go in detail, but once you have taken care of adding your keys and you followed through these steps, you will be able to launch the session using remote SSH on the compute node. And these are the entries that I just walked you through, that how you need to be mindful of the resources you're trying to ask for and where. So that is essentially what all this is. So once you have this, so what I'm going to do is I'm just, save the file, you can exit it. And now from your local device, you can say code. So I'm going to just start my code session. So once the code window is here, now I will do Remote Explorer. And in the Remote Explorer, I'm going to focus on the SSH part. The SSH part first, I need to go in order. First is, if I just want login node connection, I can open a new window and connect to the login node. It will ask for the password here because this is the first time opening a connection to the login node. So I'm going to do that. Enter that here and follow. It'll ask you for two-factor authentication. And I think it might not. Yeah, so it did not like that password. So let me try the other one. I'm just waiting for the duo factor, the original, the first code to disappear because I can use it only once, the 6-digit code. Okay. So now that I have this here, you can see that it is establishing the connection. It's saying opening remote. And once the connection is established, it will say Canon because that is what I had used for my in my SSH config file. So that will not work. All right. So now when I'm here, I can open my terminal and I can see that I'm on the login node. So this one is boss login. So now that, so I'm on my login node, which is great. So now if I want to do a compute node, what I need to remember is the way I have set up the config file in the login node itself. So login node, the host nickname is right here. So if you look at this section, I have already entered stuff that is needed to establish a master connection. So these two things, the control master and control path, are the ones that are needed to have that single sign-on option enabled. So this is already there, which what that means is now that I'm connected to the login node, if I now want to connect to the compute node, so I'm gonna now, if I go back to my config file, one is VS Code nickname that'll get me to the test partition. The other one is VSCode GPU, which will get me to the GPU partition, GPU test partition. So the same names will appear here. So there's a VS Code and there's VS Code GPU. So now I'm going to hit this VS Code GPU. I can hit in the current window. And now it should not ask me for a password because my single sign-on option is already enabled and I've already established my first master connection. So once I'm here, if I look at the details, it takes a little bit longer to connect to the compute node. So you just have to be a bit more patient. And this is where I was saying that you need to have multiple, hit this retry 2 to 3 times before it's able to give you a connection. So it'll do it, but it'll just take like, 2 tries or 3 tries sometimes. So once it has given you the connection, you will so again hit on the retry, and hopefully now it will bring up a prompt, which means you're now connected, and you will see this name here, VS Code GPU. Oh, this one, I think I ended up making a mistake. It's not taking the same username, so sorry about that. So I'm going to close the connection here and make sure that my username is the same here and here. And oh yeah, that's why it was not working because I was doing a different username. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's try this one more time. So go to Remote Explorer and first you establish in the SSH, you first establish a connection with your login node. So I typically prefer to do it in a new window. And then it'll ask me for my password. So I'll copy and paste it here. Okay, so now this has been established and I can verify that by opening the terminal and it'll show me the login node. And now I'm going to pick VS Code GPU. So now this should go fine. I like to click on details just to make sure that I'm not seeing any errors while it's establishing a connection to the compute node. So looks like that this time it did go through. And then once you open the terminal, you will see that now you're on a GPU node. Okay. So it's least amount of steps because everything is now happening on your personal device through your SSH config file. So there's no extra step of logging to the cluster actively, then trying to authenticate, process, things like that. So in that way, it is least number of steps required to establish a connection to the login node and also to the compute node. Because once you have the login node, you will be able to enable compute node connection. And as I said in the Pro, you can also have it enabled in a on a different node, like you're on a GPU node. Now, if you so choose, you can go back to here and go to Remote Explorer. And now if I click on VS Code, which will take me to the CPU node, I can open another new window and this will get connected me to a CPU node. So I have that option. So I have 3 sessions which will let me do that. Oops, I don't get that. Anyways, so just to keep this in mind, and I'm not gonna go through the proxy jump, but this is the main difference between how your SSH config file will look like if you are just using proxy jump versus if you have a proxy command. And the instructions to launch a connection using proxy jump are actually on this on the Kepner Institute website. So I've already linked to that. So if you're interested in doing the proxy jump, please by all means explore it. It's a bit more multi-step process because it does require you to actively get to a compute node and then use that information to establish a remote SSH connection. So these are some of the best practices I have laid out here. One thing to be mindful of is we are limiting login sessions to a total of 5 per user at a time. So which means you need to be aware of how many VS Code instances you're launching on the cluster, because really you're allowed to have 5 login sessions. After that, you will get a message that you're disconnected, like you will not be allowed on the login node after that. And then another thing to keep in mind is if you are launching a session on the login node, please use it only for writing or editing your code, not for running any job. You don't want to run any job on the login node. It slows down other people logging into the cluster. It also is not a very performant node. It is not meant for compute. So for anything like that, you have to use the compute node session. So you jump on a compute node and then you can run your Jupyter Notebook or R or MATLAB or any other script via VS Code session. And finally, and then again, similarly, compute node, don't use it for editing work because that can easily be done from login node. And then for any interactive session, like what I showed you, make sure that you are on a VPN. It's a give or takes. It may not always help, but sometimes it can help to have a stable connection through a VPN. So, another thing to be mindful of. And then when you have launched VS Code session via interactive way, make sure that you're always, after your work is done, you run a SQ command. And then if you have a job running, then you should cancel it because you need to put back those resources that are allotted to your job into the shared pool. Okay, so this is more of a thing for your remote tunnel methods and when you're doing it using proxy jump, because those are all interactive. All right. But actually, this is more relevant for your remote tunnel because in proxy jump or remote SSH, once you close the connection, it will automatically relinquish those resources. But in the tunnel, it won't. So you need to have that going. Okay. So some things to watch out for. So one is if you are using the remote SSH connection, because we have the single sign-on option enabled, you want to make sure that there are no lingering connections that could interfere. Sometimes that has happened. So just make sure there are no stale connections from before. So, these are the checks you can run. Again, all of this is already linked here. It's mentioned on our documentation. So just feel free to go through that. But the main steps is to check whether there is a connection. And, because we have used Canon as a nickname for our login node, so this is essentially the way to check it. If it exists, you want to exit it. And then when you check it again, now you should see some message like this that says no such file or directory, which means there is no stale connection anymore with your login node. Then if you think your VS Code is running slow or you're having some environment issues, look for these particular folders like cache, cache data, cache extensions. If you're on Linux, so that means if you're on the cluster side, this is where these folders are on a .vscode or a .vscode server. So under that, you can open this. You can actually remove these folders like data or cache data. If you're on Mac, they're typically under the library application folder. And if you're on C, this is where the location is. But if you can remove those, start by removing cache, then cache data to see if that helps with VS Code running slow. Then the other thing that we have often seen is a lot of times, people are using the remote SSH, so they have things put in their SSH config file, but the nickname is not matching. The host nickname for the login node needs to match in what you're putting for your proxy command. If this is different, if it says compute, your connection will not get established. So make sure that these names always match. And then, as I already told you earlier, that when you're doing remote SSH, you need to make sure that in your SSH config file, you have these directives. And if you have the directives, they have the right value that is needed for your work. So things like memory, time, partition, whatever needs to be part of your salloc command, proxy command. And then again, you always need to make sure that you have the mem flag enabled in your salloc command. So just, again, things to watch out for. And this is just a way for you to test if your SSH config file is set up correctly. If it is, you will just be able to do SSH followed by that host nickname. So SSH followed by Canon or SSH followed by compute. And then you will be prompted for your password and your two-factor authentication, and you will get the connection established. So this is a quick way for you to check if your SSH config file is set up correctly. Another thing to consider is on the cluster, the .bashrc file that you have, avoid having conda initialization statements. Sometimes that can interfere with having a stable connection. And in any case, we do say not to have conda initialization statements in your .bashrc, because for other things also, it can create conflict when you're trying to install packages. So these are some of the things that you can, this is just a documentation linking to why we recommend having your bashrc as clean as possible. All right, and then finally, make sure that you are always exiting cleanly by closing the remote connection. It's very important when you're doing it for the tunnel. And then definitely make sure you don't have multiple windows open, because some of that can always create some issues with getting connected to a compute node. And if you still continue having problems, do come to our office hours to troubleshoot this live. And with that, this is just some of the resources for VS Code related work, and just an advertisement for our upcoming training. So the next one is actually on managing research data at FASRC. If you're interested in learning more about that, this is the link to our calendar, which will take you to our next set of training. We also advertise training by Kepner or by Informatics Institute. So make sure that if anything is of interest, you register ahead of time. And these are some of our resources and help, how you can access our documentation or come to our office hours or open a ticket, and, training website. So please feel free to leave your feedback here. Oops, I think I was able to, yeah, here. I'll just put the link here so that you guys can access it. Your feedback definitely does help us in making our presentation better. So please make sure that you do that. I've put the link on chat. So do it on your own sweet time. And with that, any questions? I'll stop sharing and also stop the recording.